Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. Though Jamaica is the birthplace of reggae music, the UK was the second home of that genre and the launch pad from where it would take over the world by the mid to late 1970s. Reggae first broke into UK mainstream consciousness when Millie Small burst to number 1 in the British charts in 1964, and over time that country would develop its own homegrown reggae scene. British acts like the Cimarrons and the Rudies would emerge and do their thing in grand style, but were looked upon by both local and foreign fans as little more than novelty acts, way below the quality and standard of their Jamaican counterparts. However, by the dawn of the 1970s, the children of the Windrush generation, who had all migrated to the UK over a 2-decade period from the Caribbean, began to develop their own gritty and authentic root sound that you couldn't tell apart from Jamaican-made reggae. The pioneers of this movement were a sensational posse straight out of Ladbroke Grove called Aswad. They literally reinvented the UK reggae scene, telling stories about the plight of being a second-generation immigrant in England. This caused their music to resonate with the huge Caribbean communities, who became mesmerized by their infectious rhythms and hard-hitting commentary on societal and spiritual themes. They would pave the way for subsequent groups coming after them and set the stage for the likes of Steel Pulse and Black Slate. Steel Pulse in particular would build on their foundation and would smash many glass ceilings for UK reggae bands. And over the years, there have been plenty of suggestions of a rivalry and almost cold war between both groups, an issue that Aswad founder Brinsley Forde addressed recently in an interview. I've been meaning to do a video about this band for a while, so without further ado, let's take a look at Aswad, the Trailblazers of British roots reggae. Now this story begins with the group's founder, Brinsley Forde, who was born in London on October 16, 1953. Forde began his career in show business as a child actor with a role in a children's show called The Double Deckers and a sitcom called Please Sir, that were both really popular on British television. However, as he approached the end of his teenage years, he noticed that the roles were drying up for him. And after getting a role as an extra in the 1971 James Bond movie Diamonds Are Forever, he found it even more difficult to get acting gigs. His second love, however, was music, and he found himself a job at a greengrocer store in the Neadsden area of London. And it was while working at this store that he fortuitously had an encounter that changed his entire life. One morning, while doing some work decorating the shop's entrance, he saw walking towards the store the spectacular sight of a giant black dude dressed like an African Che Guevara. As the man got nearer, it hit him that the person he was looking at was none other than Peter Tosh. In excitement, he said hello to the stepping razor and was thrilled to get a response. After work that day, he ran over to tell a friend of his who was in show business about who he had seen in the street that day, and to his shock, the friend confirmed to him that the Wailers were staying at a flat around the corner from them and that he was going round to see them later on that evening. Forde would tag along and almost lost his mind when he saw Peter, Bob, Bunny, the Barrett brothers, and Erwal Lindo sitting right there in front of him. And from that night, Forde practically moved into the apartment with them and learned an incredible amount of lessons in music from them. The year was 1972, and the Wailers were in London to perform with Johnny Nash, as in those times they were in a contract with the singer's label, Jad Records. That whole experience convinced Forde that music was his calling and what Jad wanted for his life. And interestingly, he just before that time discovered Rastafari, so it all seemed to be falling into place. He was inspired to start his own band and immediately went to work putting up posters all over his neighborhood, inviting interested musicians. Forde would link up with an old pal called George Oban, who played the bass, and together they found a lead guitarist, a keyboardist, and an incredible 16-year-old drummer and singer called Angus Gay, aka Drummy Zeb. And he chose the name Aswad, that was the Arabic word for black. And that initial lineup consisted of Brinsley Forde on vocals and guitar, Angus Gay, aka Drummy Zeb, on vocals and drums, Courtney Hemmings on the keyboard, Donald Griffiths on lead guitar, and George Oban on the bass. By 1975, the band were in hot demand for gigs around the Ladbroke Grove area and eventually began to play all over London and later on out of town in places far away as Scotland. They were smoking hot musicians on the local scene and were now on the hunt for a record deal. Being big fans of Bob Marley, they all set their sights on Island Records and took a very radical step to get signed. The five guys tracked down the label's office in London, made themselves comfortable in the reception, and demanded to see who was in charge. Rather than being escorted out by security, Chris Blackwell's curiosity was aroused and he would listen to their demo tape. And after hearing a few tracks, he fell in love with their music and he added them to the Island Records roster, making Aswad the first British reggae group to bag a record deal with a major international label in 1976. In the same year, they released their debut single, Back to Africa, an infectious roots masterpiece that featured the soulful vocals of a 16-year-old Drummy Zeb. The song went to number 1 on the UK reggae singles charts and stayed there for several weeks. Their debut self-titled album also came out in the same year to massive critical acclaim, though it didn't yield very large fruits commercially. In 1977, the band decided to travel to Jamaica and soak up inspiration for their next projects. And when they arrived, they were surprised that many star artists, including Jacob Miller, who they met at a recording studio, knew who they were. And while on the island, they were given the nickname of Junior Wailers, a major accolade and testament to how authentic their sound was. But unfortunately, things weren't so rosy financially, and George Oban quit the group to go and find himself a 9-to-5 job. Aswad were an outrageously talented group and was selected to be the backing band for Burning Spear during his groundbreaking first UK tour in 1978. However, by the end of that year, they left Island Records for an indie label called Groove Records and would over there release their second album, Hulet. It's my personal favourite Aswad album, with absolute scorchers like It's Not Our Wish and Judgment Day. Truly an absolute monster of an album, and I've left a link to it in the description section for your listening pleasure after watching this video. However, by 1980, Courtney Hemmings also left the group, making Aswad a trio. And that same year, Brinsley Forde was cast as Blue in the classic movie Babylon, a film about the life of a struggling dancehall DJ in London. That film's incredible soundtrack was produced by Dennis Bovell and featured Aswad's incredible instrumental masterpiece, Warrior's Charge. Around that time, Steel Pulse were emerging as an equally, if not more popular group, and talk began to emerge among fans about a rivalry which had snowballed into a cold war and beef. However, Brinsley Forde in a recent interview rubbished all the rumours and even told a story about how Steel Pulse one time lent them crucial equipment during one of their shows in Birmingham, as theirs had packed up before the show. And he also mentioned that he first met Steel Pulse member David Hines at Island Records office looking for a record deal, and how he introduced them to Island Records A&R staff, leading to them being signed. Aswad would unleash a slew of stunning roots classics in the 1980s, but despite the critical acclaim, they didn't exactly break the records in a commercial sense. After more than a decade of unleashing countless gritty, fundamental roots reggae cuts, they would get their first commercial smash hits from a Lovers Rock inclined track. In 1987, they were again back with Island Records and were recording material for their next album. Jamaican producer Donovan Jermaine suggested they do a cover of a song called Don't Turn Around, originally done by Tina Turner. A great suggestion, as it was added to the album Distant Thunder that came out in 1988, and the single Don't Turn Around became their biggest hit that flew up to number 1 in the UK charts and stayed in the top 10 for several weeks. It also hit number 1 in New Zealand, top 10 in 5 other European countries, and top 40 in many more. They would replicate this success by putting out material that leaned more towards lovers rock and dancehall. The album Rise and Shine that came out in 1994 contained the top 5 hit single Shine that earned the group their first Grammy nomination for Best Reggae Album. However, despite this new wave of success, Brinsley Forde left the group in 1996 for what he described as religious reasons, leaving Drummy Zeb and Tony Gad to continue with Aswad as a duo. The exact reasons why he left the group are still not very clear, but in recent times, he's hinted that while Drummy was inclined to lovers rock in later years, that he was a roots rebel through and through. Personally, I think Forde might have been unwilling to continue on the more commercial direction that they were headed. So Drummy and Tony would continue touring and recording as Aswad until sadly, Drummy would pass away on September 2nd, 2022 at the age of 62, bringing Aswad to an end after almost 5 decades. The group recorded an incredible 21 albums of staggering quality, and they've gone down as not just the UK's prototype reggae group, but truly as among the greatest of all time, and outfits that not only turned out stunning roots reggae classics, but truly let the world know that British artists could bring it just as hot and authentic as their Jamaican counterparts. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.